in Demon Hunter are. Potentially some of even the kind of big higher end minions in the deck as well could be very powerful to get into later on. But that does mean that we're all done with that match. It does mean that X-Hope will be going through in a great spot to get through to the top 8 hopefully tomorrow. But taking a look now with some of the other players, we have one of your and I favorite players to watch over the course of APAC Grandmasters in Alutemu. Always a joy to watch and glad he's doing well. And Leta, a player that I see time and time again on ladder, just flying the flag for Italy and all his teammates from that country.
Yes, a very exciting matchup. Honestly, every time we get APAC versus Europe on the big stage, I'm excited for us to have a chance of finally proving them wrong, Daruk. And Alutemu, we've said it so many times that we have fans of the way he spells his Demon Hunter. However, that has been banned away now, and we're going to see Alutemu on his other decks. However, I just noticed that Alutemu doesn't have Druid for this event, which is, it seems so wrong.
What? That is disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what to even say? For those of you who maybe were not able to keep up with APAC GM, it was not only Alutemu, but also Glory and Possessi, who were consistently bringing Druid as the 3 Japanese players from the region, and consistently doing very, very well with it indeed. But it seems like finally he feels like the metagame isn't situated well enough. Maybe he just wanted to play something else. Because he also doesn't have Warrior as the other premier deck, or at least deck you would definitely expect him to bring here. Instead going with Hunter, Warlock, Rogue, and Demon Hunter, and now on the Rogue for his next game. He's definitely got his work cut out for him in a fairly complicated mirror.
Yeah, it is same lineup on both sides. For Leta, I would say it's a little bit more conventional, but there's some techs here and there that I've got my eye on. I think that the Warrior with Eggs version has fallen off quite a bit on ladder that I've seen. Most people choosing to opting for the Deathwing version and just more consistent, aggressive plays in the middle of the curve. We might see that later on, though, because we're starting off with a good old-fashioned Rogue Mirror. And already, Pharaohcat giving Colossus of the Moon. Probably the second memeiest card it can give after the Generous Mummy.
But it's quite a big difference. It's Generous Mummy miles and miles in the lead, and then Colossus quite far down in second place.
Mm-hmm. But they're both pretty much unplayable, I would say, in a lot of matchups.
Agreed, 100% on that one. What is not unplayable, though, is Shotbot, the perfect follow-up here for Alutemu. Even though I would say Coin Miscreant is always tempting, in the Rogue Mirror specifically, I always prefer going for Coin Miscreant into Lackey, or even doing it a little bit later on if the cards allow you to.
That's right. Coining Miscreant on your 2-mana turn is probably one of the rookie mistakes in the matchup because it walks so neatly into a Seal Fade from the other side. So we're going to see Alutemu go for the play you were recommending, and the premier lackeys to get here definitely faceless. Oh, 2 of them!
Yeah, pretty premium. When you're ahead on board, that is exactly what you want in this matchup, because even though we talk about Galakrond and Togwaggle, the early game, I think, Gio, we can quite clearly see often plays out differently.
Yes, indeed. We can talk about all those intricacies of the late game and the swingy potential, but a lot of the time, if you can pull ahead and get your invokes online, especially when the questing adventurers are a variable in the matchup, sometimes it can go so far in the favor of one player that the Galakrons don't even make a big impact by the time they're played. And Alutemu is definitely looking to be in that position now, picking up his own Seal Fate for a very neat removal onto the opposing Miscreant.
I wonder.
So just trying to lock down this advantage, I would say, is what Alutemu should be moving towards in these coming turns, which means probably just lackeys, and more lackeys, trying to get those stuck on the board. Removing the Miscreant makes sense when there's a very decent chance that your opponent has generated Witchy Lackey at this point, is generally, I think, what you want to be moving towards in the matchup.
It's just a question of whether Alutemu wants to pair this Seal Fate with Spy Mistress or the Faceless Lackey, or potentially a Lackey that he gets off the Seal Fate. We see him hovering towards the 1-drops first. Not sure if he's even planning to go for Seal Fate if that's the case. So the alternate line of play is 2 1-drops plus dagger, but I don't see reason for that when the Seal Fate lines up so cleanly, and by this point, Leta has a minion that will be trading up and possibly could generate minions that take value trades with rush effects, and so there might not be a nice undamaged target in the near future.
That makes a lot of sense to me. If this does make sense there, sorry, I was tempted to say you should go for another prep, given that he had another lackey in hand, another spell lackey.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a snap pick on the Eviscerate, where there was definitely merit for thinking about another prep. I guess without having your questing or Edwin in hand just yet, it could be too far in the future that we were thinking of, but I would like to have seen Leta about it for a little longer.
Yeah, it's possible he just kind of ran out of stuff to do if he went with another prep and just burned through the rest of his cards. But I think you're on average picking up decent enough cards to where that was a closer choice than he maybe made it appear.
Well, the good thing now in the more recent builds of Rogue with the Questing Adventure package is that people are not finding space for Faceless Corruptor anymore. So that potential to get blown out in the mid-game is largely mitigated. You don't feel so bad about leaving up a lackey or two. There's, of course, still Togwaggle, but of course, it's going to be on a specific mana turn when that's scarier. Whereas the Faceless is, I think, scarier even on turn 6 immediately along with a lackey.
Yeah, one turn you do feel kind of bad about leaving a lackey up, though, is turn 6 going into Togwaggle, which is, I think, the main reason, probably, why Alutemu is deviating away from Shield of Galakrond on this turn. It allows him to play out the Kobold lackey to clear off both of the minions. But in the end, it looks like that's maybe not the line he's even going for here. Oh, well, I take it back!
He can... Of course he went for that line, Dark. But in all seriousness, the Hanar somewhat punishes a Togwaggle as well, which is in the fact that if you're playing Tog this turn, then I get to stick my Hanar and go off with a bunch of secrets and additional value, where Alutemu's hand is running dry of things to do compared to Leta's, which is just full of card draw and expensive things on the left-hand side.
I see your point. I definitely see your point. I'm skeptical to say that you want to go too all in on Hanar in this matchup unless you're ahead on board, is when I find it's really useful to make it more difficult for your opponent to clear things off. But maybe I'm just kind of not valuing its power highly enough.
It could also be that Alutemu was prioritizing getting down the ambush, also as an answer for Togwaggle, and if you're playing a secret that turn, it kind of makes sense to pair it with Hanar anyway. In any case, the punish was not there for Leta. I mean, of course, it got rushed down, so there was no available Tog, even if it were in hand, but we see that Alutemu manages to get a lot of resources out of Leta's hand, and picks up Never Surrender as his other secret, which is, I would say, one of the most useful ones in the matchup.
Yeah, very, very nice to lock down the board, especially as at the moment, Alutemu has got to be thinking, you know, it's going to be looking at... You're looking at winning on tempo, I think, at the moment. He does not know that Leta is missing Togwaggle and Galakrond, so he must be thinking, well, if he's got them, I need to be getting a lock on the board quickly. But the good news for him, of course, is that they are both without their powerhouse cards.
Oh, Evasive Worm, huge pickup here. We were singing its praises, and Hunter turns out it's pretty good in Rogue, too. Maybe this card is just the nuts.
Job done.
That was the perfect outcome for Leta there. I guess the 5/6 that has Death Rattle is also a pretty good outcome, but of course, immediately clearing off the minion is huge there. Alutemu could respond with his own Draconic Lackey to find something high tempo to the turn. He has Kobold Lackey plus trade to get rid of the Evasive Worm on with his remaining mana. I'm not a big fan of flicking a 5/3 just because there are scarier targets in there.
I mean, I was looking quite heavily at Draconic Lackey on this turn. I think you can still go for the flick afterwards if you need to, depending on what the option that is offered to you dictates.
They're very expensive for Alutemu there. Not gonna lie, I was going for a bit of a flurry moment there, looking at the Deathwing. Pretty heavy. We're gonna see Alutemu go for Ysera, because I guess it's very niche situations where you feel good dumping your hand as Rogue, which is when drawn any value at all. I have to say though, the way Alutemu's hand was shaping up before he got the Ysera, it looked like a Deathwingable hand.
Who in their right mind hides loot?
It's such an interesting point in the matchup that we don't really get to seal too much anymore, because in a list that's running Togwaggle, Galakront, Kronks, Edwin, 2 questings as well, one player is almost guaranteed to hit one of the power cards that actually just wins the game almost on its own. But for both of these players, it's just a really scrappy game where they're having to piece together some kind of a win condition, or at the very least just try and eke out a survival tactic until they find their power cards.
It does very much look like an arena match so far.
Right,
a bunch of generated things and taking the most efficient trades. And in that vein, I'm a little surprised to see Leta point his Praise Galakrond to the Skyvateer that can't immediately attack, because I was looking at buffing this 1-2, then trading into the Temple Berserker and daggering down the second half. But I guess he's looking to deal with the 2 lackeys instead. Picks up Dirty Tricks, pretty huge, to help him get some card draw. And he knows that Alutemu has, at the very least, still a secret in hand.
Yeah, Leta is getting very, very close to some very, very significant card draw. Now with Dirty Tricks, 2 Skyvateers on the board, that's guaranteed 4 cards over the next few turns. And I think that is, as I was saying, you're very likely to have found one of the powerhouse cards at this point. This should be getting him there.
Yep, it's very problematic now for Alutemu that the Flick, although it deals with the Skyvateers, is giving Leta more things to do. And if you're paying that much potential to your opponent just to develop a 4-4, I feel like on average that's going to be a greater benefit for Leta than Alutemu. So he would feel pretty hesitant about playing the Flick. However, it's not like the Skyvateers can't just trade themselves off, at least the 1-1, if he doesn't play it. So looks like he's just going to bite the bullet here and hope that the Ysera can carry later on.
It is such a miserable game plan, as even though he hasn't found the powerhouse cards yet, Leta's still got more card draw at the very least, with the Greyheart Sage to keep cycling through his deck. Just find something that can win the game. Neither player has anything.
I am desperately hoping that Leta finds something to do. Otherwise, we might see him actually play the Colossus of the Moon, and we would look like absolute idiots for what we said at the beginning of the game. But there it is. Something more efficient for Leta on the following turn. That is if he can clear up some hand space.
Yeah, he needs to clear up a lot of hand space, right? Because he has to get the evil miscreant down to generate the lackeys. Then, of course, get the wand, play the wand. So he's not going to have a lot of hand space to do that.
You could just see him go for shield plus backstab onto the Flick. But I think he has a pretty decent read on Dirty Tricks on Alutemu's side. Sorry, it's a guaranteed. Did he see both ambush? And that's why we're seeing him not play any spells. Wants to keep Alutemu's options very limited here. Leta is accepting... sorry, not going to overdraw quite yet. It's 9 cards.
Well, we've been gearing up for quite a while on saying that Ysera would be the play, and to be fair, it looks fairly clean here, all things considered, where you can take out both the Greyheart and the shield. But do you think he's going to deviate over to the lackey plan instead?
I highly doubt it. In terms of the lackeys generated for Alutemu, it's hard to fill out that remaining mana with anything that makes it more worth it than playing a Ysera, in my opinion. But Alutemu is going to instead fill out his mana with Flick Sky Shiv, conceding that his own Shield of Galakrond will be removed. And setting up a board with Never Surrender, which could be his best way of regaining tempo.
It was close, right? Because I think if it was playing against the secret build, you wouldn't even consider playing Ysera, or like even picking it probably, because you just get Blackjack stunned back to your hand very, very quickly. Against the stealth build, though, that Leta's got that's not running saps, I think you have a little bit more liberty to just throw it down there.
I'm still living in a world where what if this was Deathwing? But of course, no one could have predicted that Alutemu would draw garbage turn after turn.
Yeah. Wand is playable on this turn as well, it must be said, with just a backstab being thrown down first.
And Leta choosing to make the dirty tricks go off. He has his own big swing available, hoping that whatever he draws off this wand will make it worth it that Alutemu draws 2 cards, and that Edwin absolutely justifies it.
That is going to do very, very nicely. Backstab Abyss, Edwin.
He even gets a non-rogue class card to activate the Vendetta, which was in his hand, off the Pharaoh
Cat. I didn't even remember that.
That's kind of gross. Now he can just stab Vendetta onto the flick. He can eviscerate whatever he likes, basically.
Yeah. Absolutely perfect. And even if this Edwin gets dealt with, at this point, I do not think Leta could care less. He is so likely to be able to move into a win now with the wide board being generated, having the ability to draw Galakrond with his Krongs. I mean, just look at the deck size difference. Leta, purely based on the number of cards drawn, has just absolutely decimated his opponent.
There's just not a way to come back from this. Galakrond not even an option for Alutemu. Yeah. And yes, he is running the secret version, but he has not drawn his Blackjack Stunner. I guess the turn starts with Praise Galakrond, try to generate Ethereal Lackey into Sap. Outs. He was hovering over Ysera. You could just say, I am not dealing with this Edwin most of the time. So Ysera rush, deal with the Tog, and just hope I'm not dead immediately on the next turn, which technically wasn't dead on board, but he was going for some answer to Edwin, doesn't get it.
Yeah, that's just going to be game. Whether or not he's dead on this turn, which he is, it wouldn't make any difference because Leta has not only the advantage on board, but also in terms of killing his opponent, which means heading into Game 3, Gia, it is going to be, I believe, even though we didn't get to see the first game here, Leta with only his Demon Hunter left active.
Yeah, on Game 4, just the Demon Hunter, which is quite similar to, I think, the older builds. Nothing of the control variant that we were seeing. None of the Cobalt Spellkin tech, which, again, Sottle said it, that I think it's just the way to play Demon Hunter because Alutemu played it once and it got banned once on stream. And yes, I will subscribe to that church because I think that the card is just super consistent in Demon Hunter. But the old guard of the build, you can't completely knock it just yet. We've seen some players still rocking it, notably the French Coalition and Galen. However, the Warglaves of Azeroth is just one copy now for Leta, which overall I think is a positive, but maybe 0 is the best way to go.
Maybe. It doesn't even matter though, although I have misled you once again, Gia. A classic Derek Brown prank in which I come out looking brilliant. It is going to be the Highlander Hunter as the last remaining deck for Leta, and it is a fairly standard build, I will say. However, it's a much more aggressive than some of the other versions that we've been seeing, with not only Dragon Queen Alexstrasza stripped out, but also the Crash as well, right up at the top, being taken out in favor of a much more aggressive early game.
Yes, he's got Boom Pistol Bully also in the 5-cost slot, which is very relevant if he's looking to run into some rogues. But Alutemu is switching onto his own Hunter, so we're going to see a good old-fashioned mirror. On the lower end, there is also Bone Chewer Brawler with Guardian Og Merchant. That combo can be very oppressive in the mirror, and also versus Rogue, because once the minion is damaged, can't backstab it, can't seal fade it.
Already looking like a very nice little start to the game for Alutemu. He's got early curve, he's got coin rot nest. I like pretty much everything that I'm seeing there. And so the onus on Leta is definitely to catch up. But I think he's got a respectable hand in terms of fighting back and regaining the tempo.
I would agree. Desert Spear is huge to deal with those early drops, and he can use the Scale Rider to complement it over a couple turns. I really like that Alutemu chose to go for the Og Merchant just as a 2-1, not getting too greedy with the Battle Cry, and realizing that if you just play threat after threat after threat, if your opponent misses even one turn of removal, that advantage can snowball very quickly in favor of the player that was the first to put down a threat.
It can indeed. Even though the power of budget SI7 Asian, as we've seen since the start of Hearthstone, in the form of the Scale Rider, is pretty huge. Forcing the kill command effectively out of Alutemu's hand means that Leta can very handily clear up with the Desert Spear now.
Right. And you've heard of Glavebound Adept tennis. Have you heard of Rotnest Drake tennis?
Yes.
Because it's unlikely that Alutemu is going to want to coin it out against just a 1-1. But in the near future, we could just see one Rotnest Drake be getting the other. And if Leta's the first to blink, he could very well just fall behind for the rest of the game.
He could, but I have to imagine that therefore he is going to hold back on the Rotnest on this turn, with even a reasonable alternate play, Scavenger's Ingenuity into probably Stormhammer, I'd have to guess. I think that that's much, much stronger and much less vulnerable to the response.
Yes, if you're expecting exactly Rotnest Drake, then the Zixor looks, at first glance, pretty clean for this trade, but if it gets Rotnest, suddenly your Rotnest is taking a 50-50. The downside of the Stormhammer, though, is that if Alutemu develops 2 minions instead of 1, then your response gets a little bit weak on the following turn. It's kind of difficult to place the odds on that one. But
yeah,
we could just see here from Leta Animal Companion Kill Command instead to respond to this.
It's not bad. You know, Huffer clears the board and Misha defends you fairly well.
And even Leok lines up okay against the Ooze. Definitely like this. But now, Dragon Bane has a great target. Or just the Invasive Burn off the top.
It's kind of close, but I think how disastrous Dragon Bane would be if you miss in terms of fighting back for the board. I like just going with the safe route here. It still is a lot of damage represented next turn.
Speaking of missing, though, it's getting to the point where if Leta wants to take the safe route yet again, he's face tanking 5.
Yeah.
That is not within the territory I feel good about, especially since all he's developing is, what, a sharpshooter on top of that. I was pretty prepared to roll my chances with the Rotnest and try and develop Fairy Dragon alongside it.
It's not looking good for Leta, I will say, but if he can dodge this Dragon Bane going face and not all too many more damage effects are found, board control is conceivably winnable for him here and able to just held for the rest of the game. So while he is on the ropes here against Alutemu's onslaught, I'm seeing a small window for Leta to seize things back.
I gotta respect it. I was talking about how oftentimes it's the first player that blinks here and takes the suboptimal removal in terms of in the name of trying to preserve their health total that falls behind in this matchup. So it's Leta sticking to his guns here, trying to make sure that when the Rotnest does come down, it's of a big enough impact that it turns the entire tide of the matchup. But yeah, it does look like the Dragon Bane could be flipping a coin for his doom in the near future.
Yeah, he's clearly thinking of taking it the, I suppose, arguably safer way instead by just developing his 2 bigger minions.
Because if it does miss there, and even if it's not Rotnest Drake as a response, even if it's Tiamat or Dinotamer Brand, suddenly Alutemu is in a terrible spot. So he's developing 2 threats. One of them is a very great response to Dinotamer Brand, but that draw is huge for Leta.
That is absolutely massive. He was otherwise looking at tanking another 2 with the Fairy Dragon, but in this spot, doesn't even have to take the damage. More goes to the face, and all of a sudden, in a heartbeat, he's representing 3, maybe even 2 turn lethal, depending on what Alutemu's response is.
The power of the Drake yet again, but now Alutemu has a 3-sided dice roll. I don't think that even exists. But, okay, that is one of the 2 good options. Because now, if he picks up some damage alongside the Scale Rider, that could just be lights out. Leta fishing for Zephyrus into Holy Light. Not available, though.
It's still so close, I think, Gia. Like,
Yep.
I agree that Alutemu is on, right knocking on the door of lethal here. But if he doesn't get the lethal next turn, Leta is potentially just looking at counter-lethal of his own.
Well, the Scale Rider could then hit the Rottnest Drake instead, or could pick up Scavengers to deal with the most damage on board. And then Leta is still representing quite a bit. Man, it's scary.
So close.
And the problem is, if he goes Scavengers 3-drop, 3-drop, he can't fit in the hero power on top of that as well.
Very
So
true.
Alutemu is looking at very specific damage breakpoints for what burst he has remaining. He has his own Storm, he has Zephyrus, and he has not Kill Command anymore because he played it in the early game.
So I suppose the play that makes sense would be Scavenger's Ingenuity and rush
Cedar
whatever you
Stand?
get. Rush whatever you get in to survive, and then just hero power. But when you get Zigsaw Prime, unfortunately that is not a possibility, and he cannot set up the 2-turn lethal.
But Leta did not find lethal on this turn just yet, so Alutemu has a draw for lethal again, but I think Leta can set up for 2-turn lethal on his own, even if there's a Zixor on the other side, because the Stormhammer will remain with another charge.
And right on the brink here, Alutemu, after going 7-0 through the Swiss, has got to be thinking back on every one of his decisions in this game. Was there a possible way he could have squeaked in 2 more damage over the course? It seems such a small amount, but it is the difference maker here.
I don't think there was immediately a window for that, but Leta realizes there's no way for him to play around Unleash the Hounds, and so big draw for Alutemu.
Oh!
It's not there! It's 1-off from the Desert Spear!
Oh my god. Taunting him! It is. But not quite able to get there. Zixor Prime, even being able to clear off the entire board with the +2/+2 buff, doesn't get there. The Stormhammer for, what has it even done? 12, 15 damage over the course of this game is enough to close things out for Leta.
I have to say, that was looking so great for Alutemu throughout the majority of the game. He had the early curve, but it really came down to Leta being so patient with his Rottnest Drake. And I was saying, I would have blinked there for sure, would have taken the 50-50, and that could very well have lost me the game were I in Leta's shoes. But he identified that the kill command was used very on for Alutemu, so he played a little bit more fast and loose with his health total and got absolutely rewarded there at the end.
Massively rewarded for sure. And I think it was tough for Alutemu there, because at the end with the Scavenger's Ingenuity, I think if he had hit the Diving Griffin, that would have been more likely to be a win for him, because he could have traded in, set up the 2-turn lethal and still survived until the following turn. Draws from Leta could obviously have turned that around, but a devastating way for him to go out right at the final hurdle there. And it does in the end mean that, unfortunately for him, Leta is going to be going on to the 8-1 record. And while I definitely don't want to write out Alutemu yet, we still need to take a look at the tiebreakers. It's usually the case that one player on 7 and 2 makes it through. It's looking